President Alassane Ouattara has announced that French forces will withdraw from the West African nation this month. He made the announcement in an end-of-year speech.
My dear compatriots, dear brothers and sisters, we can be proud of our army, whose modernization is now a reality. It is within this framework that we have decided on the coordinated and organized withdrawal of French forces from Ivory Coast. Thus, the camp of the 43rd Marine Infantry Battalion in Port Bouet will be handed over to the armed forces of Ivory Coast starting this January 2025.
Hours before Ivory Coast, Senegal also confirmed that French troops will leave the nation by the end of this year. The Senegalese president, Bassirou Diomaye Faye, has said that this year would see an end to all foreign military presence in the country. Earlier, he also announced France would have to close its military bases on its territory.
For over a century, France treated Africa not as a partner, but as a possession. From Mali to Niger, from Chad to Burkina Faso, France extracted wealth and resources, leaving behind poverty and dependency. French companies controlled uranium mines in Niger, gold in Mali, and oil across West Africa. French troops were stationed across the Sahel, claiming to fight terrorism, while ensuring Paris's control never slipped. But everything has changed. The people of Africa have had enough. And in 2023, a wave of historic decisions swept across the Sahel. Mali expelled French troops. Niger canceled uranium deals. Burkina Faso demanded sovereignty. For the first time in modern history, three nations stood up together and declared, "France, your empire is over." The shock in Paris was immediate. Emmanuel Macron called the moves unacceptable. French media tried to paint African leaders as puppets of Russia. But on the streets of Bamako, Niamey, and Ouagadougou, the people cheered. For them, this was not just politics, it was liberation. French flags were burned. Russian flags, Pan-African flags, and national banners filled the skies. Chants of "Down with France" echoed in capitals where French had once ruled unchallenged. This wasn't a small shift. This was a geopolitical earthquake. For the first time since independence, African nations are not just resisting France. They are actively kicking it out. To understand the shock in Paris, we must understand what France has just lost. For decades, France ran a system known as Francafrique, a web of military bases, corrupt leaders, and economic deals that guaranteed Paris control. African presidents who resisted were overthrown. French troops were always invited to stay, and billions in resources were funneled directly to French companies. Take Niger, for example. Over 70% of France's electricity comes from nuclear power, and much of that uranium came from Niger. Yet Niger itself remains one of the poorest nations on earth. While French homes were lit, Nigerian villages stayed in darkness. Or look at Mali. For years, French troops claimed to fight terrorists there. Yet terrorism only spread. Many Malians accused France of fueling instability to justify its military presence. Burkina Faso faced the same fate. Its gold mines enriched foreign companies, while the people saw little benefit. This was the heart of neo-colonialism, independence in name, but dependency in reality. But the cracks began to show. When leaders like Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso and later Ibrahim Traoré, Assimi Goïta, and Abdourahmane Tiani rose, they spoke directly to the people. They promised real independence, not French-approved independence. And that is why Paris is in shock today. Because the very foundation of Francafrique has collapsed. In response to France's dominance, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso did something historic. They united. In 2023, they formed the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, a security and economic pact to defend each other from foreign interference. For decades, Africa's weakness was its division. But now, Africa's strength is its unity. The AES leaders wasted no time. French troops were ordered out. Western military bases were shut down. New partnerships were signed with Russia, Turkey, and China. Gold, uranium, and oil contracts were renegotiated. For the first time, African resources were staying in Africa. Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso became a symbol of this revolution. At just 35 years old, he openly declared, "We are no longer slaves of France. We are free." His fiery speeches ignited crowds and inspired a new generation. The alliance sent shockwaves across Africa. Suddenly, other countries began questioning France's role. From Chad to Senegal, debates about sovereignty filled parliaments and streets alike. France's empire wasn't just weakened. It was collapsing. Back in Paris, the panic was real. France depended on African resources not just for wealth, but for survival. Without Niger's uranium, France faces an energy crisis. Without African oil and gold, French companies lose billions. Emmanuel Macron tried to put on a brave face. He called African moves unjust and warned of foreign meddling. But the truth is clear: France's power is broken. The European Union, too, is rattled. With Russian energy gone, Europe turned to Africa. But now Africa is saying no. Instead, deals are being signed with BRICS countries. Africa is choosing sovereignty over subservience. Even in Washington, alarm bells are ringing. The United States fears that Africa's rejection of France will lead to a rejection of the U.S. dollar. And with BRICS expanding, that fear is becoming reality. For decades, the West lectured Africa about democracy and good governance while stealing its resources. Now, the West is learning a painful lesson. Africa will no longer be lectured. What we are witnessing is not just the end of French influence. It is the end of an empire. From Mali to Niger, Burkina Faso to Guinea, African nations are reclaiming their wealth, their dignity, and their future. The symbols of empire, French troops, French contracts, French control, are gone. In their place rises a new vision. A vision of an Africa that trades on its own terms. An Africa that builds with BRICS, that strengthens its own currency, that invests in its own people. For the first time in generations, Africa is not waiting for permission. It is leading. And Paris? Paris is left in shock. Because the empire it thought would last forever is collapsing before its eyes. This is history in the making. The fall of France's empire. The rise of Africa. And the world will never be the same.